Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Daniel LePlante. We are off to the US of A, baby. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! We are in the last days of the half term and we are going out soon. So I'm going to do something that I've never done before, and that is just finish getting myself ready. I do have wet hair. I have just gotten out of the shower. And I didn't want to not film today, so I'm going to multitask and we'll see where we go, how far we get. I am no Bailey Sarian. This is literally just getting myself ready for the day. Without further ado, let's dive on in and start getting ready. Our story begins in 1986 in a small town in Massachusetts called Pepperell. Pepperell. I think I'm saying that correctly. Pepperell. This was home to 15-year-old... Turns out I can't do two things at once. I might just have to do my face really quickly before I carry on. I'm like, what happened? Who said what where? Don't know. I'm just looking at my face. My face. Oh! Beaut. My eyes may be deceiving me, but I don't think I look any different. Hair will dry naturally. Let's go. So we are going to 1986. Small town in Massachusetts of Pepperell. This was home to 15-year-old Tina Bowen, her sister Karen Bowen, who was 9, their father Frank, and sadly the family had lost their mother and wife the year before to cancer. So this was still very much a grief-ridden household. Frank would work quite long hours, and it was just a really difficult time for the family because they were all grieving, and Frank had to work a lot in order to provide and put a roof over their head, so the girls were quite often at home on their own. And on one night in 1986, the two girls, really grieving and missing their mother, decided that they would play or use, I don't know, it's not a game, is it? You can't call it a game, whatever way you want to think of it, but a Ouija board. I have had an experience one of those before, and even just looking at one terrifies me. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. And the person, I was young at the time, the child that I was using it, playing, I don't know how you talk about a Ouija board, whatever, they moved the, themselves, and I was terrified. If I found that terrifying, and I was probably between those ages of 9 and 15, what happened to the Bowen girls is just something else. They had their seance, and then that night they went to bed, and that night when they were in their beds, they heard knocking on the walls. On the freaking walls. They believed that they had contacted their mother in another dimension, spiritual plane, whatever you want to call it. And they started to ask questions, and the spirit of their mother, so they thought, was answering with knocks and scratches. So, that's the dog. So I imagine, knock once if yes, or twice if no, something like that. And that's what was going on. I imagine if you thought it was your mother, you wouldn't be scared because you would be desperate to have contact with her and talk to her. So, but still, I think I would still be scared actually. I'm not sure. As the weeks went on, the knocking and the scratching, banging, it got worse, and it became more intrusive into their home and their life, and it started to stop them from sleeping. It was waking them up in the night. It was almost aggressive, and then it became scary. It was no longer, even if they had found it maybe comforting on that first night with the questions, it became something else, and they were frightened, as you can imagine. They did tell their father about the goings-on, and they were terrified, and he assumed at first that they were just, like, this was a symptom of their grief and they were hearing things, and I suppose he probably was quite worried about them, but he didn't believe that there was anything going on, that there was a spirit at all. And then things got a little bit stranger, and I'm not sure what his thinking was around this behaviour, whether he thought they were doubling down on it, but things started to move in the home. So furniture would move from one side of the room to the other. What the hell? By the way, when I was researching this, it was terrifying. Luckily, I did not do any research at night time. Drinks were being, so they'd make a drink and then it would be gone. It would disappear. The lights would flicker. The TV would change channel on its own, and other bits and bobs would be moved around the house, so just like general belongings. I mean, that's enough to just drive you insane. And because they were children, they're 9 and 15, like, if that was happening to me as an adult, we'd be out. I often think that because I love an old house. It's one of my favourite things is to walk around historical houses, to learn about them. I love historical houses, and just, yeah. And if it's got a bit of a scary story, even better. I like all of that. And in the daytime, I don't understand people that go sniffing around those places in the dark, or on their own. However, I kind of can understand it because it's exhilarating and all the rest of it, and yeah, I think we all do kind of want to believe in something else, don't we? A bit, I suppose. Anyway, I've digressed. What was my thinking about that? But if I bought an old home, because I feel like that is in my bones. I would love that, to live in an old house, like a nice old house, nice English or Victorian sort of era house. And if any funny business, like Amityville Horror, all this stuff, when things go on, I'm straight out. I don't care. I'll be renting somewhere. I'll move in with family. No, I'm bye-byes. But if you're children and your parents are just like, and your dad's like not at home very much, and he's not really hearing or seeing any of this stuff going on, because it's always happening when the girls are at home alone, and they were at home quite a lot. You have no autonomy. You can't just say, I'm going to leave this house. You're stuck. You're there, and that's terrifying. That's really scary. So I really feel for the girls, because that must have been quite frustrating. Like, these things are only happening when they're home alone, and their dad doesn't believe them, thinks that they're going crazy basically from grief. Wow, like scary times. The knocking was mainly confined to the girls' bedroom. But then over time it moved, and one evening the girls were at home on their own, dad was out. They heard knocking from underneath the floor, from underneath. So they were terrified, but they got a kitchen knife, braver than me, I'd be gone, and they went down into the cellar to investigate and see if anything was down there. Oh, sweaty palms. They go down into the cellar, and this is where they find, and this is just terrifying, they find a note written on the wall. One source, pun not intended, said that it was written on the wall with ketchup and mayonnaise. But then another said it was just like written onto the wall in red pen. So I'm not sure, or paint. But anyhow, the message was, I'm in your bedroom, come and find me. Absolutely not. They called Frank immediately, in a state, come home, please come home, Dad, we found this note. He still remained sceptical at this point. He really did think that this was, I mean, I suppose you would, thinking with an adult brain and you're not knowing anything, you haven't seen anything going on or heard anything yourself. He just thought this was grief. And then one night in December 1986, they returned home. They'd been out with some friends and had a nice time. They come in and they notice that the toilet had been used while they had been out and not flushed. I can only imagine what that means, if you know what, a little grim. And then finally, you're like, finally, Frank is, okay, something is going on. This is weird. Something is amiss. Definitely not right. So he goes around the house and he's searching around trying to, is there somebody in the house? His first thought is that somebody is in their house. What spirit is like going in your toilet? That's not a thing, is it? Is it? I can't imagine. Why they have no use for bowel movements. That's not a thing. When he gets upstairs, he notices that his wardrobe looks strange. Something's going isn't quite right with his wardrobe. And he opens the wardrobe, and inside the wardrobe is a dishevelled, scary-looking man. He was smelly, greasy. He looked odd. His face was painted. On closer inspection, he had a hatchet and a wrench. So he's got a couple of weapons. Uses that to his advantage, and he manages to get all three of the family members into one room. He begins taunting the family with the wrench and the hatchet, and Tina manages to escape out of a window, and she goes to a neighbour to get help. This makes this crazy figure disappear. He's off because, help is on the way. Also, these bangings and all of that goings on and the things moving and the TV turning on, the flickering lights, all of that has been going on at this point for nearly a year. So as they start to think about what's gone on here, they realise that basically this man, this crazy looking man, has probably been living in their house, in the walls and stuff like that, for about a year. The scary man has gone now. He's run away because of Tina getting help. But the family don't want to stay in the home, and that must have been quite a hard call to make actually at that point, because that is the home that they shared with their mother. Yeah, I can imagine that was difficult to but they were also terrified, rightly so, and they hadn't found this man. I believe if they'd have found that man, they would have been in their home, but they hadn't. He was in the wind. So the family went and stayed somewhere else for a few days. After a day or two, Frank returned to the house on his own to get some belongings, because they needed probably new clothes and bits and bobs. When he gets near to the house, he notices a figure in the front room, like movement in the front window. He's like, I don't believe it. He's back. And he's right, because when he looks at the window, up pops scary looking man. Frank immediately called the police and they arrived. It was snowing at the time, and there were no footprints in the snow to suggest that anybody had left the house. So in they go. Braver than me, again. I could not do jobs like that. And basically they go into this house knowing that this scary figure, man, he's a man, is in there. They're looking around, and at first they literally cannot find anything. There's nothing obvious. They can't even sort of work out where he would be, until what they do find in their search is 2 family photos that have been stabbed and 2 messages that have been written on the walls. One of them says, "I'm still here, come and find me." And the other one says, "I'm going to kill you." Okay, I don't fully understand, so I'm going to read out what they found, how they found his space. So they found a small, very small, triangular crawl space in the bathroom wall. So triangular, and it housed, what now? I've lost my place. Joyful. It housed the plumbing, obviously, Sophie. So to get to it, you had to hoist yourself up and over a 4-foot foundation wall, get through an 8-inch wide opening and drop down into the space. I'm not sure if I understand this. I'm sure I saw a picture, actually, so I'll share that. It was just a diagram, though. It connected to the cellar, which was a floor below, and an officer managed to get in there and jump down. At first, he thought there was nothing there because he went down into the cellar, into this space, and then he found our man. They also found food packets and things like that down there and in that space. So he'd been there a lot. The police officer that went into the space, brave, again, very brave, he said that he noted that this dishevelled man just didn't seem fazed. He was calm. He didn't seem nervous or worried or scared. He certainly wasn't scared at the fact that this police officer, who was scared himself, had a gun to him. He had a gun to his head, basically. But this guy just remained chill. I find that scary. They're the people that are scary, the people that have nothing to lose. He was swiftly arrested and taken to the police station. This is where he was identified as Daniel LePlante. So who is Daniel LePlante? He was born on the 15th of May in 1970. Technically, I've been calling him a man, but at the time of this case, he would have been 16 years old, so he was a boy. He was born in Massachusetts, somewhere called Towns End, and he had a terrible start in life. He had a terrible upbringing. He was physically and sexually and mentally abused by his father. He grew up in general chaos. It was said that their home was grim and like a hoarder's paradise. He had dyslexia and he struggled at school. He also kept himself to himself. He was a loner. He didn't have any friends. People thought he was odd, bizarre, strange. Because his behaviour was so bizarre and odd, he ended up seeing a psychiatrist when he was in his earlier teenage years. He was 14, 15. And again, this is just an absolute, it's makes me so angry, but his psychiatrist then also, as well as his father, sexually and physically, psychologically abused Daniel as well. Like, what the fuck? Like, that's somebody in a position of power and authority, and it just makes me so angry. Someone that's meant to be helping you as well. Like, what? It was around that time that he started his criminal activities. He started to enter, like break and entering. Is that what I'm burglarizing? The words aren't coming properly at all. That he started to break into people's houses, pull it together safely, and normally while they weren't there, and move things around. So sometimes he would steal things if there was anything worth stealing, but it seemed like it was more of a mind game for him. Like, he wanted to mess with people and make them feel scared, so he would go into their homes and move things about. Also, at around this time, 15 years of age, he somehow got hold of Tina Bowen, her phone number. He went to the same school as her. Somebody gave him her phone number. He liked her. He became a bit obsessed with her. Well, to say the least, wouldn't you think? So he started to ring her, and he lied about what he looked like, who he was. He said that he was the captain of a football team somewhere, and he was tall and had blonde hair and things like that. And it was far from it. He did not look like how he had described. And they had this sort of back and forth conversation, a bit like if you were a pen pal with somebody, but on the phone, a bit like voice notes, but real, phone calls where you both speak at the same time. Well, a back and forth. You know what I mean? We all remember phone calls, Sophie. After a while, they agreed to have a date. This is tricky because he's described himself as this jock, basically, and blonde, blue-eyed, tall, handsome, and he turns up and he's greasy and, untidy, dark hair, literally the opposite. I find that a bit fascinating. Like, why? She's going to remember what you said, mate. Anyway, they go on one date, and she felt sorry for him. So when he arrived and he looked like that, and she was like, okay, she just felt a bit, she felt sorry for him, but she also felt a bit obliged because she'd said she would go. That's, never be worrying about that. He was, but 15, that's a lot of thought process to have at 15, isn't it? Like, you're not developed. What's happened to my thighs? Too much yakking. Needless to say, the date did not go well, and she mentioned about the thing that was weird, the most weird, I guess, because it was probably all a bit awkward. But the thing that stood out to her is that she mentioned about the passing of her mother, and he was bizarre about it. It was a giant red flag. I know it can be really awkward. It's a weird thing, isn't it? Like how death is a part of life, but we can be quite squirrely around it and feel a bit uncomfortable and sometimes not know what to say. And people's grief can make people uncomfortable. In some situations, people put their foot in their mouth and they say the wrong thing to somebody that's grieving. But this was weird and different. This was like, there wasn't sympathy or empathy or, oh, I'm sorry, like that must have felt sad. He was more concerned. He had questions that were just odd. Like, he said to her, how much did her mother suffer? Like, what? What a question. And how did you feel when you found out that she died? Well, I mean, what? So clearly a very troubled young man. Tina made it her excuses, and the date only lasted for an hour, and then she went home. And she was just like, never doing that again. Never, ever. Like, he's out of my life, he's out of my hair, thank goodness, so she thought. His date with Tina, and well, even though it was a terrible date, it just made him more obsessed with her. And the rejection made him, I don't even know if it was angry, because he seemed to be a bit closed off from any big emotions. Like he just was, yeah, he just wanted to psychologically torture her, basically. So for nearly a whole year, he was in her house in that crawl space, just terrorising her and her sister. Wow. Like, it's almost unbelievable, isn't it? But that is what he did. At around the time of their date, after their date, other people, friends, people that knew him, said to Tina that there were allegations of R word against him. So stay clear. So that's just interesting to note for later on. I'll try and remember. Daniel was taken to a juvenile detention centre until October of 1987. But then he's moved to an adult detention centre, and his mum was able to post bail for him, which was like £10,000, which, yeah, anyway, I don't know where that money came from or how that came about, but that's what happened. So he was then out on bail, and almost immediately. And it makes me so angry that things like this happen in the system, because, like, was it anything addressed for him? He clearly had massive psychological damage from his childhood and the trauma. And for a person, also, when he was 15, he was able to basically live in the crawl space of someone's house. Where's his parents? Why is he then allowed to just be posted bail? Because it really annoys me. When somebody turns 18, that does not mean that everyone, it's a massive problem in society. I just find it really, can you tell it's angering me very much? It's just a number. And actually, for children that have grown up in trauma and abuse and neglect, they've got one hand tied behind their frickin' back, and then we go, oh, you're 18 now. Yeah. They're not, are they, up here? They haven't had a normal upbringing. They haven't been cared for or looked after. They have no life skills. This person, Daniel, has committed like a weird crime, really weird, really like dangerous, threatened people with hatchets and wrenches, and been living in the wall of someone's house. And we're just, 18. Oh yeah, post bail. What? No. The vein. It annoys me. Immediately, he's out of the detention centre. His trial's on the 11th of December. But straight away, he's like back to it. He's burglarising houses again. He breaks into a house in the middle of the day and steals cash and 2 guns. Oh, I've made myself hot. His family were like, oh, he's meant to be staying at home, being good, waiting for his trial. He hasn't got a job, but they notice that he's got cash and money. Oh. Nothing done about that. He even asks his brother's friend for bullets for this gun that he's stolen. So, it's just, there's so many things that blow my mind in this case. It makes me cross, it really does. Because what happens ultimately is, it just could have been avoided. This friend, his brother's friend, gave him bullets and was like, oh, okay. He gave him some story and convinced him to give him bullets that would fit this gun. Somebody that's awaiting trial. Right, helping him out loads there. On the 16th of November, he breaks into a house. Forgive me if I pronounce their family name incorrectly. Gustafsson. And a family of 4, there's 2 children, husband and a wife. He goes in on this day and he steals some odd things, like a cordless phone, TV boxes, like for Sky and things like that, and the TV remotes that go with them. So maybe he was planning, it looked like he'd stolen those things and he was planning on terrorising this family, like he had done with the Bowen family. If he's got the remotes, he can do the whole thing with the TV and all that business. I'm not sure. But anyway, regardless, he stole these items. He unfortunately went back to their house at a later date in December the 1st, 1987. He claims that he didn't think anybody would be there. They weren't there at the time, but he was doing his usual. I think he was going into their home because this was the second time he'd gone in to move things around and freak them out. but he was interrupted because Priscilla came home with her 5-year-old son, William. She was a nursery school teacher. They came home. He put William into a closet, and he used things around the house to make like ties and things, and he took Priscilla into a bedroom and tied her up. He proceeded to R-word her, and that's why I said, oh, I'm going to try and remember that, because there was an allegation when he was 15, like a rumour that there were allegations of that against him. So I found that interesting. So possibly those allegations were correct back when he was 15. Once he had finished R-wording Priscilla, he took a pillow, he placed it over her head, and then he shot her in the head and he killed her. This is one of the reasons, by the way, that I don't like covering cases with children, because it just gets me so upset. I think I just go there. I can separate myself with other things. So excuse me, and I'm just going to be quick. He took William, this 5-year-old boy, from the closet. He took him into a bathroom, and he drowned William in a bath. Also, it has definitely hit me differently since having children, things like that. Yeah, I can go there too easy. The daughter, Abigail, she was 7. She sadly came home during this time, and he coerced her into the house and into a different bathroom, and where he drowned Abigail as well. Daniel then leaves. Andrew Gustafson arrives home from work, and the house is eerily quiet, and he knew something was wrong. And I'm going to say luckily, because from what he said afterwards, but luckily he found his wife's body first, and he immediately left the house. And this is why I say luckily, because he later went on to tell officers that he didn't even look for his children. The house was so quiet and his wife was dead, and he just left and called the police because he knew that his children were also dead in that house, and he did not want to find them. And I'm going to have to shake this one off. Whoa, I can just feel that. I can feel like, I feel it so deeply when it's the kids. And I know that sometimes some of you have suggested cases with children, and also some people have suggested cases with disabled young people or adults, not for that purpose, but they happen to be the victims of the crime. But I do have neurodivergent children, and again, it gets me. I just feel it so much. Oh yeah, shake it off, oh. So it does feel lucky that he found his wife first, because yeah, he didn't want to find his children like that. And obviously still awful for the officers that went in and found. I always think that with, if they have to find children, it's just awful. I think that must be really traumatizing for officers, even the most well seasoned. They found evidence, and it was it was quite cut and dry. So they brought sniffer dogs in, and they traced a scent from the crime scene all the way back to, guess who, Daniel's house. Just like boom, they were there. There we are. So that was a piece of evidence that they followed his scent all the way back. They also found footprints that matched the size and the shoe of belonging to Daniel. That was in the flower beds outside the family home. And then in the woodlands in between the houses, what they found, so the name plate from the house, it was a metal plate that had their family name on it, and that had been taken from the house. I find that a bit eerie, just, I don't know why, but he took everything, didn't he, from that family? So he took that, and that was discarded in the woodland, as well as gloves that had gunshot residue on. They found the shirt that Daniel had been wearing when he drowned the children, and that was wet. And they found the gun that had killed Priscilla, all sort of dropped on the way. When they arrived at Daniel's house, so when these dogs led them there, he had gone. He'd already fled. The next day, he just continued breaking into houses to get supplies so that he could live. He was on the run, so he was just breaking in to get cash and food and things like that. But then the police did find him on the 3rd of December in a dumpster. That's where he had chosen to hide. In 1988, Daniel was found guilty of the 3 murders, and he was sentenced to 3 life sentences. And then in 2017, he appealed for a reduced sentence, and the judge said no, absolutely not. He believed that Daniel showed no remorse at all for his actions, so he will not be eligible for parole until he served 45 years. So that's what I'm going to do the maths. So 1988 plus 45. So 2033. He was a young chap though, wasn't he? So he was sentenced when he was 18, and he was 18 in 2017. So in 1988 he was 18. So in 2033, let's just do when he was born. Minus 1970. Fuck you. So 2033 minus 1970. So he would be 63 when he's eligible for parole. So not release, but parole. It almost feels like a case in 2 parts, because the beginning of this case just felt like an absolute horror story. It really did feel like something out of a horror movie or a horror book and novel. And then it ended in such tragedy. It should have, the end of the case, it felt like, I almost felt like I'd come to the end of the story of this case when he was arrested in the Bowen house. He'd done this weird thing and blah, but then so quickly after he was released on bail, it went from unreal, like fiction almost, to proper true crime. I find that's why I'm so angry. I get so angry about it. It gets my goat, because and also the fact that they were babies, they were children. I found some information about Andrew, so the father that survived his wife and children, and I just cannot imagine. Like, I don't know, but part of me just thinks, how do people in that position move on? And his story is actually quite beautiful. So he believed in God and he had faith, and he never lost that faith. I mean, the grief and that must have been just almost too much to bear. But he found comfort in his faith. Somebody wrote a book about his life. Let me just read you the details. I'll put them in the description box as well. It was called Testify to the Light, the Spiritual Biography of Andy Gustafson. Oh, God. I get so annoyed that I can't say those names properly. Written by Reverend Betsy Waters. And I have just read, and I think that confirms something that I didn't say earlier, because I wasn't sure if it was right or not. But because this author of this book spoke to Andrew himself, wrote his biography. Priscilla was pregnant at the time of her murder. I read 2 sources, and one source didn't mention it, so I wasn't sure if the other source was legitimate. But now I can confirm it. So she was pregnant. Andrew became a spiritual leader in the church, and I love that it's called Testify to the Light. Is that what it was called? I've already forgotten. Is that what it was? Testify to the Light? Because he did shine his light. He went on to help others. He wanted his story to help other people. He was involved in helping with the aftermath of Katrina, and he knew that he had something in him that he needed to share from his experience. And isn't that a lovely thing? I find it really nice that there can be light and dark. I've said it before. There's light in the dark. And it's people like Andrew that bring that out, because the very worst possible thing I think that can happen to somebody happened to him in his life. And then he took that darkness and he turned it into a light that he could shine for other people and help other people, and he really did. He went on to remarry somebody called Carol. She was a widower. And apparently she was part of the church, and she really helped him in his healing and coming through his grief, and that brought them together. So they married. Sadly, Andrew died from cancer in 2014, leaving Carol. So again, she was widowed for a second time. And something that I read, which was lovely because they interviewed the author of the book, the Reverend Betsy. They asked Betsy like what struck, how was Carol after the passing of Andrew, because that was her second husband that she'd lost, and it's just so touching. Apparently, the Reverend said it was very sweet because when he passed away, Carol handed him back to his family. She sort of let him go. I've made myself cry. She handed him back to his original wife and children. What's wrong with me today? And before I turn into an absolute blithering mess, that is all I have for you on today's case. There. Unbelievable case. Right. I'm going to have to love you and leave you because I am out. Oh, I still have a little bit of time to spare, so I might have a quick coffee with Paul. Actually, that'd be nice. So, please share with me your thoughts on this case. It just blew my mind. Thank you all so much, by the way, for all your case suggestions. There's so many people have given me some and I'm really grateful for them. So they are added to my list. Do you remember my son deleted my list by accident? I have a huge list now, a really, really big one. So I'm just working through those. It's definitely helpful to have some ideas and things like that. I really like it. I appreciate it greatly. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Sin and Tonic. Hope you join me next week for another program. Sorry, bars for a jar. Gin. I'm going to go and I might have to meditate actually after this one. I think I should. Also on that note, I do find it difficult with the cases with the kids and like I said, with additional needs, special needs, things like that. And somebody shared one with me and said about it being important to tell their stories. And I totally agree. Never ever, I don't disagree with that at all. But I think at this moment in time, I've still got to actually be able. It just wouldn't be a good enough video if I'm just crying all the way through, or if it's going to scar me. So occasionally I have been in the middle of research. There was a particular case that I'm thinking of where I was in the middle of my research and then I was like, I can't quickly before I go because I just like the packaging of all this stuff, even though this looks a bit grubby around the top. Never mind. Look. Oh, and also the name of it. Happy Go Lash, love it. Body Shop, love Body Shop. Like bronzer, coconut bronzer, Body Shop. It's so nice and it smells gorgeous. It smells like coconut. Right, I really am going to love you and leave you. I will see you all next week. Be good. Bye.